Okay. So I would like to start by thanking the organizers for this opportunity to present my work here, and also for organizing this nice conference in the first place. So I'll discuss a new set of asymptotic conservation laws for electromagnetism. So let me give you a brief overview of my talk. We'll start by discussing what are asymptotic conservation laws and what are soft theorems. Strominger and his collaborators, they have proposed an equivalence between these two. This equivalence between the asymptotic conservation laws and the soft theorems that has been established in numerous cases. Now we will study these peculiar long-range forces. These were also discussed in Professor Ashok's talk. And so he discussed how these forces affect the asymptotic dynamics non-trivially. So we'll incorporate these long-range forces in the asymptotic, we'll study its effect on the asymptotic dynamics and show that it leads to a new set of conservation laws, which we will study. Then we will discuss the implications of these conservation laws. Firstly, we will show that the first of this conservation law is equivalent to the Sahusain soft theorem for loop amplitudes. We will also discuss the implications of the higher Q, the m greater than 1 charges. And we expect that this would also be related to new soft theorems. These soft theorems have not been studied yet, but we will make some concrete comments about this towards the end, and then we will conclude. Okay. So, what are soft theorems? So when energy of one of the scattering particles in the amplitude is taken to 0, the amplitude exhibits some nice properties. It factorizes into the lower point amplitude times the universal soft factor. This low energy limit is called the soft limit. The particle whose energy is taken to 0 is called a soft particle. And so in this talk, we'll discuss soft photon theorems. So we'll start with the n+1 amplitude. So typically it will depend on all the momenta, n+1 momenta, pi's, which are denoted by pi's, and k. K is the momentum which will take to be soft. Now the leading term in this expansion, in the omega goes to 0 expansion, is 1 over omega. The coefficient is the lower point amplitude without the soft photon times some universal factor, the leading soft factor. So let us see the expression for S0. So S0 depends on the polarization of the soft photon, and it depends only on the asymptotic momenta and the charges of the other hard particles, other n hard particles. So this structure of S0 is this structure is present very universally. It is an exact statement to all loop orders. It is insensitive to non-minimal couplings of the theory, and uh, it is also true in all dimensions. So this is what makes the study of soft theorems very interesting. These universal aspects. Okay, so now we'll discuss asymptotic conservation laws. This is the asymptotic structure of flat spacetime. So at future, that is at t goes to infinity, massless particles reach Scribe-less. This line is labeled by U, and so it runs from minus infinity to plus infinity. And at each U, we have a sphere S2. So massless particles end up here. Similarly, massive particles end up at I plus. There is a similar structure at the past. Massive particles start at this I minus. Massless particles start at the past null infinity, denoted by Scribe minus. This is again an R cross S2 manifold, and these are the boundaries of this structures. So Scribe plus minus is the sphere at U goes to minus infinity, and scry minus plus is the sphere at v goes to plus infinity. It is the boundary of scry minus. Now, generically, asymptotic conservation laws take this form. The future charge is defined at scry plus minus, and the past charge is defined at scry minus plus. And so this epsilon is a parameter of the charge. It is mapped to the parameter at the past via an antipodal identification. So this is how a generic conservation law looks like. So let's discuss a special case. Let's discuss the Q0, which is defined in terms of radial component of the electric field. So the charge at the future is defined in terms of this field at scry plus minus. And so generically, for generic classical processes, the field obeys this kind of conservation law. And at the quantum level, the S matrix has to satisfy such kind of word identity where these Q zeros are these charges. And it has been shown that this word identity is equivalent to the leading soft photon theorem. So initially, leading soft photon theorem was recast as a word identity of asymptotic charges in this 2014 paper by Hay, Mitra, Porphyriadis, and Strominger. And the fact that these charges obey a conservation law, a classical conservation of law of this kind, it was discussed in Strominger's lecture notes in this paper. And this kind of equivalence between classical conservation laws and soft theorems has been subsequently been studied in many cases, and it has been established. Now, this particular charges Q0 for leading soft photon theorem, they have been studied extensively. And in this paper itself, the authors showed that these charges form a subgroup of U1, and they are called as large gauge transformations. And this is the asymptotic symmetry group of U1 theory. Okay, so let's go to the subleading term in loop amplitudes. Vishwajit Sahu and Ashok Sen, they showed that the subleading term in the soft expansion of loop amplitudes is given, it's logarithmic in energy. They showed that this S log coefficient is universal and one loop exact. So this is the subleading soft photon theorem for loop amplitudes. So natural question arises at this point that whether this soft theorem is related to an asymptotic symmetry. So this study was initiated by Miguel Campiglia and Alok Ladda in this paper. So we build upon their work and discuss the asymptotic conservation law that underlies this subleading soft photon theorem. Now, before going to the asymptotic conservation laws, so let's first discuss the origin of this log omega. So this log omega term in soft expansion, it is exclusive to 4 space-time dimensions. Such kind of non-analytic terms are not present in higher dimensions. And it is related to the long-range forces that are present in 4 space-time dimensions. So this long-range forces are actually 1 by r square forces. These don't die off sufficiently faster. They have non-trivial effect at large distances and late times. For example, if we study the asymptotic trajectory of a point particle, then it gets a logarithmic correction, and we see that it doesn't die off sufficiently at late times. So as a result of this acceleration, the particles are not free. They will radiate because of this acceleration, and this radiation will produce the log omega term. Thus, this log omega term is directly related to this long-range forces. So we will incorporate the effect of this long-range forces on the asymptotic dynamics, and we will see that naturally we get new asymptotic conservation laws. And it will turn out that the first of this asymptotic conservation law is related to the log omega soft photon theorem that we discussed earlier. Okay.
Sorry, can I ask a question?
Yes, sure.
Yeah. So in higher dimensions, do we know that? So you said that there's not a log omega term, but do we know that there's a universal factor, or is it complicated, or there is no universal factor that we know of?
Yes. So Yeah, at subleading, the subleading order is omega to the power 0, and it is universal.
Sorry, so
And it is, but for photons, it is sensitive to non-minimal couplings.
hmm,
But there is a universal piece
I
that,
see. In
yeah,
higher dimension as well.
in higher dimensions, yes.
Okay. And another question: do we know that there's also an analog of this for gravity?
Yes. So I mentioned this authors. Okay, so let me not go there. But Ashok Sen and Vishwajit Sahu, they worked out this subleading soft theorem for both gravity and QED.
Hmm.
They showed that it is universal for both the cases.
Okay, just one last question, not to distract you, but
No,
like
it's okay.
there
It's
is
okay. Completely
there
fine.
is
Yeah.
sub leading like uh, loop universal term. Um,
Sorry, I didn't get your question. Can you repeat?
yeah, so like in the case of gravity, is there a sub leading as well, like term like that is universal for gravity for at loop order or no?
Yeah, so actually now we expect that there is such a term, but it has not been studied.
Okay, thank you.
Yes. Okay. So this is our plan, next plan. We will study asymptotic dynamics in presence of long range forces. So first we'll do some purely classical calculations. We'll show that the classical theory admits a new set of conservation laws. And then we will go to the quantum theory and discuss the Ward identity associated to the Q1 charge and show that it is equivalent to the log omega soft photon theorem. And we will also make some comments about the possible soft theorems due to this higher charges for m greater than 1. Such soft theorems have not been studied. Like there was a question a couple of minutes earlier. So beyond this log omega term, the soft expansion has not been studied, but we expect that there will be some universal structure that in some subleading terms, sub-subleading terms. Okay, so are there any more questions? Okay. So first we'll discuss classical theory. So let's describe a general scattering process, a classical scattering process. So there are some n prime number of particles coming in. They interact within some finite region, and this finite region is contained within this sphere of radius capital L. So within this sphere, the particles undergo any possible short range interactions. We will not assume anything about the form of these interactions or even the strength of the interactions. They could be, however, strong. What happens within this sphere, that will not be relevant for our analysis. Then, as a result of this interaction, of this short range interactions, there will be some final particles. Let's say there are n minus n prime number of outgoing particles which are produced as a result of these interactions. Now, if we consider the trajectories beyond this, beyond r greater for r greater than capital L, that is the asymptotic part of the trajectories. Then on this trajectories, the particles feel only the long range forces. The particles would be apart enough that the only possible interactions between them would be the long range forces. Hence, this part of the trajectory, the asymptotic part of the trajectory, is completely controlled by the long range forces. And it's not necessarily straight. This is just representative. We will see that actually there is a deviation to the straight line trajectory. And so this is a generic scattering process that can occur and we will find the field that is generated by such kind of process. Okay. So we will calculate the field strength that is generated by a generic classical scattering process. We will do the calculation perturbatively in the coupling E and the asymptotic parameter. Here large tau represents the the asymptotic region. So let us first restrict ourselves to the leading order in coupling. Then we can completely ignore the effect of long range forces. Yeah. So just to emphasize, we are just considering the effect of long range electromagnetic force, and our particles are charged. So to the leading order, the effect of this long range electromagnetic force can be completely ignored, and hence asymptotically the particles are just free. So the trajectories can be given by these equations. If we have an incoming particle, then capital T denotes the value where this particle enters the sphere of size capital L, where capital L. And similarly, an outgoing particle has this kind of trajectory. It is this is the free trajectory, and capital T is again denotes the value where the particle escapes the sphere of radius capital L. Okay. So now we will consider this sort of sources, asymptotically free sources, and calculate the field strength generated by the scattering. So we can write down the sources. So we have outgoing particles, three outgoing particles and three incoming particles. So in the Lorentz gauge, the field can be obtained by from this equation. So this is the Green's function for the box operator. We will use retarded boundary conditions, and so this calculation is very simple. So let us find the field at Scri plus. We can reach Scri plus by taking r goes to infinity for fixed u and fixed angle. This is the profile we get to the leading order in E. We get power laws in U and R. M is less than N, so this is a convergent series. And so these dots represent terms which are exponentially suppressed, and these are not relevant for our analysis. Now in particular, we will study this component of F mu nu. A denotes the S2 coordinates. So it takes two values. And so this superscript 2 denotes that this term is the coefficient of 1 by r square term in FRA. And so FRA2 starts at order u. Now this coefficient will just be a function of x hat. So we will later on define the charge in terms of FRA2. But to the leading order, we see that this is the u expansion of this term. And later we will see when we incorporate the long range forces, then this expression will get a log u correction coming from the long range forces. Okay. So let us include the subleading term in asymptotic dynamics. So this is the equation of the asymptotic part of trajectory. It has only long range electromagnetic interactions. The rest of the interactions that might be present have all died off at last tau. So this is the equation at last tau. Now next what we will do is we will substitute the orderly solution of F mu nu that we obtained earlier in the last slide. That we will take that solution and substitute it here, and see and study the leading order correction. So the leading order term comes at order 1 by tau square. This is the long range force that we have been discussing. Now we can simply solve this equation and get a logarithmic correction to the trajectory. So here C is order E square. And so an important point to note is that there are possible corrections here that we have ignored. So there will be an order 1 by tau to same order in coupling E square, but it is suppressed at large tau. So the solutions that we get are not exact at order E square, but we have to keep in mind that we are ignoring some terms. Okay. So let us look at the expression for Ci mu. Now, if we let's consider a particular J term in this sum. So what this term represents is the effect of on this ith particle because of the 1 by r potential produced by the jth particle. So what we do, then we sum over all possible j particles that this I particle can interact with. So if Ci is an outgoing particle, then we will sum over all the other outgoing particles that are present, whose long range force the I particle will experience. Now we will substitute the order E cube corrections to in J sigma and find the field. And we will and what we get is that the logarithmic corrections here that we studied in the last slide, they produce this log U term in FRA2. So this is an order E cube term that appears because of long range forces. So this is what we studied. At the future, we get a log U term. Now we can repeat the similar calculation at past null infinity. So we will incorporate the effect of long range forces at the past and similarly calculate FRA to the subleading order, and we see that there is a log r by r square term, which is order E cube term. Now we can just compare the coefficients of this term, and we show that this modes obey this kind of asymptotic conservation law. And I should mention that this law was first suggested to me by Miguel and Alok, and so I proved it for generically for the generic case, and this is the first of the conservation laws that we will study. Okay, now we will repeat the same story including a subleading term. So this is what we discussed earlier, that the asymptotically particles accelerate and they radiate. This radiation contributes to the subleading order and produces new modes, as we saw earlier. Now, when we go to the subleading order, what will happen is this radiation will back react on the particle and it will correct the trajectory of matter particles. And this correction will contribute at the subleading order. So again, we start with this equation. And now the terms on the right hand side.
Shaili, can I ask a question?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So in the past null infinity, how did you exactly calculate the field strength?
Sorry, sir.
In the past null infinity, how did you calculate the field strengths?
Yes. So I basically repeated the same steps, and so I have added. Yes. Sorry.
Yeah. So you don't think of that as setting out the boundary condition, the initial condition, and then you evolve? That's what I'm asking. That past null infinity, you set up normally the initial condition, right?
Yes. So our initial condition is some set of incoming particles.
Okay.
The way which can be arbitrary. Now what we are saying is that this incoming particles also experience long range forces.
Okay.
So they will also have this log tau corrections at the past.
So these are this is just a Coulomb force of the incoming particles.
Yeah, this is the Coulomb force. Yeah. So so we are still using retarded boundary conditions, and so this so there is a natural map between this UN minus 2R for these solutions.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
So, yeah. Okay. So now we are considering the subleading corrections to this equation of trajectory. So for that we will substitute the order E cube F mu nu that we calculated in the last slide. And what we see is that there is a log tau by tau cube correction that occurs at order E to the power 4. This is the subleading term that is coming due to back reaction of the radiation. Now we can solve this equation. And this is the sub-leading correction to the trajectory, which is order e to the power 4. And this is the form of Fi. The exact form is not important. What is important is that this is universal. It just depends on the asymptotic momenta of the particle and the charges. Okay. Next, what we will do is we will consider this corrected trajectories and again find the field strength that is produced by particles which have this kind of asymptotic trajectories. And so let us, so this will produce order e to the power 5 modes in the field strength. So now let us study FRA3. FRA3 is the 1 over R cube term in FRA. It starts at order U square. This is order E term. It is present even at the leading order. Then the next term is U log U. This starts at order E cube. And finally, we have a log U square term. This is an order e to the power 5 term. So this will be of interest to us. Now again, we can repeat the similar calculation at past null infinity. And at past null infinity, when we go to this order in the field strength, we see that there is a log R square by R cube term. And again, we can compare the coefficients of these terms to show that there is a new conservation law between these modes of the field strength. And just to emphasize, both these charges are order e to the power 5, and this is the second conservation law that we have. Okay.
Sorry, Sally, can I ask? So you said the next term is also universal. The sub-leading.
Yes.
So if you add some non-minimal coupling, it will not change this log tau by tau behavior. Is that
yes?
It will not change this coefficient.
Yes, right. So non-minimal couplings are they die much faster than these terms, than the minimal couplings, and this kind of logarithmic corrections come from the minimal couplings.
Okay. So if you go to next order in this, like log to the m tau, then at some point these non-minimal couplings start interfering, or they don't?
Yes. So non-minimal couplings change the Power laws. So here there are Power laws also that we didn't write down. Like I said, there is a 1 over tau term here that I have not explicitly written down. So non-minimal couplings will affect at the Power laws.
I see, but no log coefficient it will affect. Is that?
Yes.
Yeah, I think the log coefficients will probably come from infrared effects, and
okay,
so that's probably the reason why this is happening.
So at any order they will be universal. I mean, they will just come from.
Actually, the leading one probably will be universal. I mean, are you saying, Sailing, that even the subleading, if you take log, suppose the leading one is log tau to some power, if you take lower power of log tau, will that also be universal?
No, that will not be universal.
Yeah, so what are the leading
log
tau?
Right. At each coupling, I see. At each coupling, the leading log is universal. I see.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. So if you have a log tau by tau square term, that is not universal.
Okay. Thanks.
Yes.
Okay. So Saili, I have one more question.
Yes.
This coefficient of in the future null infinity, the coefficient of these log u terms depend both on the incoming and outgoing states, right? Incoming and outgoing momenta.
This Ci mu. Are you talking about this coefficient?
Yes.
Yes. So if you have if I is outgoing, then Ci has contributions only from outgoing particles.
Outgoing. Okay. Yeah.
Yes.
But I'm saying that in the form of the field strength, right?
Yes.
The coefficient will depend both on the incoming and outgoing particles.
Yes. So the log u coefficient at u goes to plus infinity, that depends on the outgoing Ci's, and the log u coefficient at u goes to minus infinity, that depends on the incoming Ci's.
I see. Okay. So that is the coefficient that will relate to the past null infinity.
Yes.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks.
So even though it's at Scri plus, at u goes to minus infinity, it has contribution only from the incoming particles.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Yes. Yes.
So Sally, here all your particles are massive, right? So if so this you go to plus infinity behavior somehow, I mean, will it change if you have massless charged particles, massive, or how is the? I mean, everything you're saying, will it remain unaffected if your charged particles are massless?
Yeah. So all these coefficients will go to zero if if all the particles in our theory are massless.
Yes.
Then this CI's, FI's all will go to zero. You see, there are explicit factors of
Okay.
masses.
So you will not have a log omega.
Yes. Yeah. So it's just like, so even the subleading terms,
Right. Okay.
they are just like log omega terms.
Okay.
So the
In
classical log
gravity,
omega.
you will get, but not in QED, I guess. In gravity, you will have some
Yes.
log omega soft, even with massless particles, right? For gravity,
Massless.
or?
Yes. Yes. There will, due to the dressing of photon, that part will be
Yeah.
non-zero.
Okay. Thanks.
Yes. Okay.
Massless particles will accelerate in gravity, right?
Right. That's why. So they will have there will be a log. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Sayari, can I ask you another question?
Yes.
So these matching conditions that you have imposed, I don't have any intuition for it. Could you explain like where they come from? Because it seems you're matching some, like this matching condition. I'm sure it gives the right answer, but is there any intuition about why this is a correct matching condition?
Yeah, actually, so I'm not imposing this equation. I'm just calculating this coefficient at the future. I'm calculating this mode at the future. I'm calculating this mode at the past, and I'm comparing the coefficients of the two. And and these are equal under antipodal matching.
Oh, I see.
Yes.
So you just compute it and you find that that's equal.
Yeah. So this is a property of retarded solutions. Yeah. So we had discussed the second conservation law as well. So let us just summarize. So we have established conservation laws for following modes of FRA. Log u by r square term at the future and log r by r square term at the past. Similarly, log u square by r cube term at the future and log r square by r cube term at the past. Now what we expect that such kind of conservation laws would hold for all n modes of FRA. These charges would be order e to the power 2m plus 1. So this has not been proved for generic m. We proved it for m equal to 1, 2, 3. But we expect that such kind of conservation laws would hold for all m. Okay. So now we will conclude part 1. Let's just discuss what we will the later part. So we have proved a set of conservation laws which we expect to be true for all m's, but we explicitly proved only for m equal to 1, 2, 3. And next we will discuss the implication of the QM charges in the quantum theory. So we start with this philosophy. So Strominger and his collaborators, they have established a correspondence between asymptotic conservation laws and soft theorems. So we will show that the first conservation law, Q1 conservation law, is equivalent to the Sahusen log omega soft theorem that we discussed at the beginning of the talk. And we expect that the higher QMs should also be related to some new soft theorems. So we'll make more. So let us start. So let us go back to quantum amplitudes. We discussed that the subleading term in the loop amplitudes in soft expansion is just logarithmic term. Now we will show that this term actually follows from the asymptotic conservation law. Now this statement is an expansion. This is not an exact statement. We can project out the appropriate modes in this expansion by taking appropriate projectors on this n plus 1 amplitude. So similarly, this kind of projector will project out the log omega coefficient in the n+1 amplitude. So this is an exact statement. We will show that this statement is equivalent to the Q1 conservation law, and we will show this for the case of massless scalar QED. Okay. So this is our next goal. So let us first state the Sahu-Sein soft photon theorem for massless scalars. For massless particles, this is the form of S law. Now, what we will do is we will construct the asymptotic charge for massless scalar QED. And as we have elaborately discussed.
So for the massless part, the classical piece vanishes altogether, right?
Yes, right. This is the quantum piece.
I see. Okay.
Yes. So we have discussed that this Q1 charge is intimately tied to the long range forces. And for the case of massless scalar QED, we will see that this charge, the hard part of this charge is actually directly related to the dressing of the massless scalar field under the electromagnetic force. Okay. So let us discuss the asymptotics of free massless scalars first. So this is the equation. We can expand a generic solution to this equation at large R. So around future null infinity, this is the expansion, this is that expansion. Phi1 is the free data. All the higher order terms are fixed in terms of phi1. And phi1 is related to the creation and annihilation operators of the scalar particles. Now we will incorporate the effect of long range forces on this in this. So the dominant term in the electromagnetic coupling of the massless scalar field, it is given by this, is this term, where AR1 is the 1 by R term in AR. A is the gauge potential. We can solve this equation, and this is the solution. So what we see is that the free operators, the free creation annihilation operators of the scalar, are dressed by the gauge potential, and this is similar to the Faddeev-Coolidge dressing of a massive scalar field. Okay, now let us discuss the consequences of this dressing. So the currents will get corrections due to the dressing.
Oh, sorry, one question.
Yes.
So is this a classical field or is it a quantum?
Yes, so this is true classically also, and then we can quantize these expressions. Then this P, B and D dagger will be the creation and annihilation operators of the scalar field. This is a charged field. It is a complex field since it couples to the gauge field.
Yeah, but also A is going to also be written in terms of creation and annihilation operator, or you're taking it classical?
Yes, so A will be also quantum operator.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Are there also collinear singularities here for massless scalars?
Yes. Yes.
So those don't affect this asymptotic behavior?
Yeah. Yeah, so what happens is at the end, the charge is finite. But when we individually, when we look at the contributions to the charge, then some of the terms are divergent. But this, so for QED, what happens is that the charge is finite. The divergent part that comes from the collinear divergences, that doesn't affect the charge at all. In presence of gravity, there is a cancellation between two different contributions to the charge, and the charge is always finite.
I see. And if you had done the same thing for massive scalar QED, then there'll be much more. It will be more complicated. Or meaning, why is massless scalar QED better?
Yeah. So this was already done by Miguel and Alok. They have done it for massive scalar QED.
I see.
And so this is a simple case that I'm discussing here.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes.
Sorry, Sally, but to Ashok's question, the collinear, what was the, I didn't understand the, so this solution is not affected somehow by any other divergence. You said this is okay.
So AR1 has some divergences.
Right. Okay.
But the charge is finite. So what happens is this: the charge depends on the derivative of AR1, and the divergent part is just a constant.
Okay. You will explain. Okay. Okay.
Yes. Okay. So the concluding remark is that the charges are finite. They don't get any divergences due to presence of collinear singularities. Okay. Okay. So this logarithmic correction is due to the is an effect of the long range force. So this term is similar to the log tau correction that we saw for the point-like trajectory, the correction to the point-like trajectory. And so this coefficient is proportional to the dressing of the scalar field, and this is an order E cube term, and it will contribute to the Q1 charge. Okay. So let us construct the asymptotic charge. We start with Q1 conservation law, and the charge is defined as follows. We start with the log U mode of FRA. We can multiply it with an arbitrary vector field YA. This is on S2, and then we can integrate it over S2. So this entire expression is at scribe plus minus. U goes to minus infinity. Now identically we can write down this this term as an integral over scribe plus minus the other boundary term. And as it was discussed in Prahar's talk, this kind of U integrals, they are typically soft modes of photons. And this is what we will have, that the soft part of the charge is given in terms of this integrals, U integral, and this defines the hard part of the charge. Okay. Okay, so let's discuss the soft part of the charge. So let us choose this profile for the vector field Y. So we make so this choice is particularly useful when we want to make the connection of the Ward identity of this charge with the soft theorem. So so using this in this expression and with some manipulations, we can show that the soft charge is actually takes this nice form. It is indeed a soft mode of the photon A minus operator, and it also comes with the right projection operator that will pick out the log omega coefficient. Okay. Now the Ward identity takes following form. The commutator of Q1 with the S matrix has to be 0. We saw that Q1 has two parts, the soft part and the hard part. Q soft will insert a soft photon, and on the right side we have Q hard operator that we'll discuss later. So it will act on the states and produce the soft factor S log. So this is how the Ward identity resembles a soft photon theorem. Okay, so let us discuss the expression for Q hard. So using Maxwell's equation, we can write the expression for Q hard in terms of the logarithmic correction to the current, which is proportional to the dressing of the massless scalar field. So when this operator is acted on the Fock state, this is the expression that we get, where so AR1 is the dressing of massless scalar field. So this is very typical for the soft theorems, that the Q hard charge, that the hard part of the charge, it is related to the dressing of the fields under long range forces. For example, if we had gravity, if we couple the system to gravity, then the massless scalar field would also get a dressing under the under gravitational long range force. That dressing would be given in terms of HRR1, which is the analog of AR1, and this expression just gets corrected as AR1 plus HRR1. So this correspondence between the hard charge and the dressing of fields under long range forces, that is a very interesting feature of this charges, and it is true for the massive case also. The hard charge is related to the Faddy-Foolish dressing of the massive scalars. This was discussed by Alok and Miguel in their paper. Okay, so we have the entire word identity now. And so this word identity so this is the word, this comes from the word identity, which reproduces the Sahu-Sen soft-photon theorem. Similarly, we can start with the Sahu-Sen soft-photon theorem and derive the word identity from it. So that there is an exact equivalence between the Q1 conservation law and the log omega soft-photon theorem. Okay. So we have a Strawinger's triangle at one loop now. So there exists a one loop exact log omega soft theorem. The memory effect corresponding to this soft theorem was discussed by Alok Ladda and Ashok Sen. They showed that this soft theorem controls the leading order correction to the usual memory effect. This they have called as the tail memory effect. And on the third corner, we have the asymptotic symmetry interpretation. So this is not complete yet. We have the underlying asymptotic conservation law for this soft theorem, but the symmetry algebra of this charges is not clear yet. So that needs to be studied. Okay. So are there any questions? So we can go to m greater than 1 case. So we discussed QM charges, which are order e to the power 2m plus 1. And since they are this order, they are expected to be related to m loops of soft theorems. For example, if we consider the case that we studied, m equal to 1, the charges at order e cube terms, and they get related to one loop soft theorems. One loop. So these are these soft theorems are exact at one loop. And so what we expect is that the higher QM charges will be related to higher loop order soft theorems, and these soft theorems have not been studied yet. So what we can argue is that the QM conservation laws, they are actually related to following terms in the soft expansion of loop amplitudes. This kind of terms in the soft expansion. So what we expect is that this Sm has to be universal, and this mth order term will appear only at m loop order. Okay. So as we discussed that this kind of soft theorems have not been explored. So what we can do is we can study the classical version of the soft theorems, and in fact we proved the classical version for m equal to 2, 3, and 4. So this provides concrete evidence that that loop amplitudes will show this kind of universal expansion in the soft limit, and the classical limit of this soft theorems should match with the results that we have. Okay. Okay, so now we can conclude. We have discussed a new set of QM conservation laws. We proved this for m equal to 1, 2, 3, but we expect that this conservation laws would be true for all m's. And these charges are order e to the power 2m plus 1. And we discussed how they are tied to the long range forces. And we expect that this QM conservation laws would be related to soft theorems for loop amplitudes. We have demonstrated the equivalence for m equal to 1. But we expect that, so there is evidence that this structure will hold for all m's. So there are many questions that need to be explored in this area. Okay. So I will end there. Thank you.
Okay. So we have a lot of time for questions. If you have more questions, please.
Yes.
Maybe I can ask one question.
Yes.
So in this paper with Biswajit and Arnab, we had suggested some sub-subleading soft theorem, right? I mean, based on just generalization of the earlier method. So do these compare somehow with those? I mean, can one compare your sub-subleading result?
Yeah, so as far as I remember your paper, you had given the prediction for gravity, right?
Yeah, we had also, I think, mentioned, yeah, we had given the prediction for gravity, but presumably similar thing could be done for QED also, right? If
Yes.
you just naively expect generalization. Of course, QED is not universal, right? I mean, so there is a issue there. But suppose you naively just generalize.
Yeah, so so you were saying you are asking about this prescription for substituting log tau by log omega inverse.
That's right. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so there is some problem with that prescription for QED, because so if you consider the tree level subleading operators for QED, then they have this Q dot P terms.
Yeah.
In gravity, we have J, the angular momentum, so that the order tau pieces in the gravity terms, they cancel.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
But that order tau piece doesn't cancel in Q dot P kind of terms.
I see.
You mean, sorry, you mean Q dot X, is it? Q dot P, there will be no tau. It should be something like Q dot partial dou by dou P. You're talking about the...
Sorry. Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry. So it should, it should be Q dot del.
Momentum should still be growing as log tau, right?
Yes, angular, right. Yes. Yeah. So what Alok said is correct. So not Q dot P, it is Q dot del. Instead of the Q dot derivative del.
Okay.
So that
you're in classical terms.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah. So Q dot, I think Q dot X, right, Sally? It's Q dot X, right?
Oh, I see. Okay.
Yeah. So Q dot del will become Q dot.
You cannot go to J. Okay. Okay.
Yes.
I think that is a problem. Yeah.
Yeah. So that prescription doesn't work here.
Okay.
But sorry, Sally, the paper Biswajit, Arnab and Ashok, they had this conjecture for higher gravity also, right? I mean, at arbitrary order, right? Log omega to the m order.
No, we didn't make any conjecture actually. We went up to sub-subleading.
Oh, only sub-subleading. I see.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, because
same problem will arise for gravity.
Yeah. Problem will arise there. Yeah.
So sorry, Sally, can I ask? So what happens to that term now? I mean, it's not there at all, or this kind of problematic term. You are saying it is absent, is it, in the classical factor that you computed?
Yes, it is absent. Yeah.
So you just computed from equations of motion, is it? That's what you.
Yes. So yeah. So in this talk, I discussed the calculation of field strength F mu nu. Similarly, in the paper, I calculated the radiative part of A mu. and just calculated the log u by u square correction, those kind of corrections, and those terms will be related to this kind of terms.
Okay. So so the structure of this, suppose you look at sub-leading, that structure doesn't mimic the substitution of, if you take the 3-level sub-leading soft factor and you compute, like substitute, as Ashok was saying, J mu nu with the classical and the q dot x by the classical trajectory, that this structure of SM doesn't mimic that at all, is it?
So we do get the right term, but there are some other diverging terms. So if you use the prescription that you and Ashok sir have given, then you get some set of terms. Those include the correct coefficient, and there are some diverging terms that you cannot throw away.
And those are absent in your S2.
Yeah, these are absent in the S2.
And there are no other terms. That's all.
Yes, right.
Then, Sally, there's a question in the chat. I think it is asking about the spinning case. Whatever happens with the spinning case.
So these terms are not sensitive to the spin of the particle. Okay, so one way to So one way of seeing why these terms are not sensitive is that we can write down the spin correction to the sources, the current sources that we have, and that this was discussed in Sir's paper, Ashok Sen, Vishwajit and Arnab, that paper, that the spin corrections would always be subleading it at large tau, and those can never contribute to log tau, to these leading logs that we have in the asymptotic trajectory. That is why these terms, they are insensitive to the spin of the hard particles. Okay, so there were some other questions.
Yeah, I had a question that, so going back to Alok's question, I just wanted to understand this a little better. So you are saying that if we just take the quantum soft theorem, higher order quantum soft theorem, right, which has just a derivative with respect to p, which you replace by x,
right,
and then you substitute for x a linear term and a log term,
yes,
and you just where the linear term and then you get the correct result. Is that what you are saying?
Yes,
I see. And there is no extra term.
There is no extra term, yeah.
And this is true to the order they have checked.
Now I don't remember to the next order. For m equal to 3 and 4, I don't remember if there are some extra terms.
I see.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
I think there was one more question.
So I had a question. So in particular, your S1 term is still that still corresponds to a divergence, right, in the small omega limit. So I'm wondering if you use these sort of FK dressings, or there's some modified dressing so that you can still construct IR finite S matrices, which sort of captured all of these log corrections as well.
Yes. So the S matrices that we work with are not Faddeev-Kulish S matrices.
Yes, I know. So I'm wondering, do the Faddeev-Kulish dressing, or is there a modified dressing such that if you include all of these log corrections, then you can also write down IR finite S matrices? Because my question is, so the Faddeev-Kulish dressing, my understanding is that it keeps track of the 1 over omega pole and removes, the IR divergent contributions that arise from this 1 over omega pole. So that's what that dressing is. So is there some modified dressing that can do the same thing but also include the log divergence?
Okay, so so this log divergence is a soft divergence. And so you are asking if there is a dressing that will remove this log omega divergence. Is that your question?
Yeah.
Sorry, but this is not. Is it? I mean, this is not I mean, this is not a divergence in the sense of this is the behavior when one photon goes soft, right? I mean, the S matrix itself could be IR finite, right? I mean, that's what Vishwajit and Ashok's paper also, right? I mean,
Yeah.
so
Yeah,
this,
so this is kind of a soft divergence, right? Like 1 by omega.
but it's not a divergence in the S matrix, right? The log.
Yeah, right.
Wait, I didn't understand that. What do you mean by it's not a divergence in the S matrix?
So I think maybe Ashok can say.
I think what Alok means is that it's not divergent for finite omega, right? When the omega goes to zero limit, of course, it diverges.
Yeah. But that's also true of the 1 over omega pole.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, exactly. So I think what Prabhat was talking about is divergence in the omega goes to zero limit, right?
Oh, I see. But the Coolidge but the Coolidge is fixing the IR divergence of the S matrix, and even if you fix that, I thought the log soft theorem will. I mean, even in IR finite S matrix, that this factorization would hold, right? Because of your work with Vishwajit. I mean.
Yeah, the factorization will hold. But I think that
in an IR finite S matrix, do you still have a 1 over omega pole? Like my understanding was that there is no 1 over omega pole in the IR finite.
Yeah, in a Faddeev-Coolidge form. Yeah,
in a Coolidge-Faddeev it's not there. Yes, that 1 over omega is not there. But sorry. Yeah.
The log omega is still there.
The theorem is still there because I think Ashok should say more. But they worked with in some sense IR finite amplitudes to derive the. I mean, the statement was at the level of IR finite amplitudes, but I think he can.
Yeah. So I see we didn't work with Faddeev-Coolidge form, right?
Yeah.
So the way we did it, that our S matrix was divergent on both sides, right? But we can regulate by appropriately, and then we showed that the factor is finite, right? Both sides are divergent, but you can extract out this factor.
Oh, I see. I understand.
I mean, we didn't work with Faddeev-Coolidge because if we work with Faddeev-Coolidge, then as Prabhat was saying, this 1 over omega will go away, right?
Yes. I understand.
Yeah.
Okay, I get it. Thank you.
But if you want to remove everything, right? I mean, I would say that it's not then enough to remove log omega because there are lots of non-analytic pieces, right? Even omega log omega is a non-analytic part, right? Even though it's finite as omega goes to 0.
Yeah, absolutely.
So probably what one would want to do is to remove all possible non-analytic terms in omega, right?
But why would one want to do that? I mean, I understand trying to remove the 1 over omega piece. It sort of is related to some IR divergence, but non-analyticity in a S matrix itself is not that problematic.
Well, but that way even pole is not problematic, right? I mean, if you have a photon of energy omega,
yes,
then if it was just a question of having a 1 over omega, I would say it should be okay. Right? The problem is in the loop.
The pole, the pole by itself is not problematic, but the point is that the pole in the loop then gives you IR divergences. So if you're telling me that these non-analytic terms, when in a loop, they also give you some additional divergences, then I would say that is a problem, and we have to remove those contributions somehow. But if that's not happening, then why should
Ashok, but that is not. I mean, if we factor out the IR divergent factor in your work with Vishwajit, then at the level of the way you define the IR finite part of the S matrix, that itself has no now IR divergence, right?
Yeah, if you remove that IR overall factor.
Yeah.
Right? But then of course the leftover piece is IR finite, and then we are relating the two.
You are relating the two, and in the leftover piece, if you take one photon soft, then it has the log omega soft theorem, right? Although there is no loop divergence left in this.
Yeah, and also 1 over omega.
And also 1 over omega. So then, so these are even if you work with at least your prescription of IR finite amplitude, then these theorems will stay. They are not disappearing.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So I would say that I would say what one want to do is opposite of what Prabhat was saying. That we want some manifestly IR finite amplitude like Faddeev-Coolidge, but it should have the 1 over omega pole, right? Because that's a physical pole that we expect in the S matrix. right? I think the unsatisfactory thing that I can think of in Faddeev-Pulis is that it takes away the 1 over omega pole.
Yeah, I think the Schwartz work, S matrix work, new work, one has to check whether that produces if you work with that S matrix, whether it produces soft theorems, correct soft theorems.
Okay, yeah.
I don't think that has been checked. Yeah.
Yeah, because 1 over omega is actually a pole in the S matrix, right? I mean, an intermediate
Yes.
state going on shell.
Yes.
So in a physical S matrix, I would think that pole should be there.
Yes. Yes. Also, we see it in the classical radiation. So.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. So if a physical S matrix didn't have the 1 over omega pole, then how does one expect memory effect, right?
Yeah.
Classical limit.
Yeah. Correct.
Okay, any other questions? Sorry, I had a question from your very earlier slide where you said in higher dimensions, there will be no non-analytic terms. But is it obvious? I mean, if you go to very high loops, I mean, that if in a given D dimension, at some order log won't come. I mean, sorry, I didn't understand that. If you go to some, two loops in 5 dimensions or 3 loops or something, is it obvious that you will not get a log omega? I mean, some power of log omega, sorry.
Yeah, so actually I meant it just, for log omega. Sorry, I should have.
Okay, only for log omega you are saying that. It's not, not for the higher order.
Yes.
Yeah, I think in any dimension, if you go sufficiently high power of omega, right?
Right.
Then you will eventually be accompanied by log omega because non-analyticity is a part of S matrix, right?
Yes.
Right.
So like omega to the 10 log omega terms can certainly be there, I think, in any dimension.
But will there be some universal term of this type in any dimension? I mean, because again, I mean...
Yeah. I mean, I think the point is, at least classical, from the classical perspective, because these are coming from the long-range interaction.
Yes.
Right, one expects that at least a lot of it will be independent of the scattering region, right, where the actual non-trivial interaction is taking place.
So in any dimension, there may be some beyond certain order, there will be log theorems, universal log theorems.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay, thanks.
And those are the ones which are going to control the late time behavior.
Late time.
Yeah.
Okay, any more questions? We still have time in principle. We have 20 minutes, so you can ask freely. Sorry, Sally, can I ask one more final question? So this related to what Prahar asked, that this conservation law that you said between Scri plus plus and Scri plus minus, that you said that you just checked it for the example that you have looked at of particle scattering, right?
Right.
I mean, but in principle, there could be a proof at matching this at spatial infinity, right? I mean, that's what Miguel and I tried, but we got a wrong conservation law. I mean, we didn't get the right conservation law. But in principle, there should be a proof, right? That independent of. So that is still not there, is it? Or you think that can be done?
Yeah, that should be done. So probably proving this laws for generic M, it would be more convenient to do it the way you have done for tree level conservation laws. You just need to incorporate the effect of long range forces in your analysis.
Yeah, but for M equal to 1 also, what we did, we got a wrong conservation law. So even M equal to 1, at least we have not done it. I mean, we didn't get the one you are proposing here. We had an incorrect conservation law. I was wondering if M equal to 1 is now done.
No, I have not done it.
Okay. So
but it should be it should be doable that way also by analyzing the solutions at spatial infinity.
Okay.
But didn't Sally, didn't you describe the M equal to 1 case? I mean, explicitly. What?
Sorry. Can you repeat?
The M equal to 1 conservation law. Didn't you say that you checked?
Yes. So, so initially Alok and Miguel had proposed a different law. So the correct law is this.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah,
I think
we had tried to prove it using some Green's function technology at special infinity, but we didn't get we got a wrong law. But I was asking Sally that has she proved it, or she looked at some m particle scattering and just checked that f is same. I mean, I guess effectively it's the same.
Yeah, if you have done it for general m
That's
particle
maybe.
scattering,
I
I
guess
guess
it's the same.
right?
It's the
Yeah.
same. Yeah.
Yeah. So this is indirect proof, or
Yeah.
so, but for a generic M, it will be good to do it at special infinity. Like start with some Mozart scribe.
Yes. That may be an
minus
advantage to do it, but so
Yeah.
far, like m equal to 1 also, we don't have I think we don't have a direct, in that sense, direct proof. I mean, I guess at this.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
don't
Like
know if that's what Prahar was asking about the matching. If he's still there.
yeah, I'm here. Yeah.
Okay.
No, it would be nice to, because it sounds like all of these really at the end of the day just coming from some properties of Green's functions. So
Right.
I actually think that it should be possible to derive it for general field configurations without assuming m or n particles. Though as Ashok pointed out, if you can prove it for general m and n, that's pretty general.
Yeah. Yes.
But do you have any intuition for this? Like, it seems weird. Maybe just I don't. I understand that it's just you can prove it by explicit calculation, but like, why is it that these coefficients should be matched? Like, what's the intuition behind that? In some sense.
Yeah. So only intuition that that we have is like both these terms are related to long range forces.
Yeah, but like why log u on one side and log r on the other side? Like, why not log v and log u and log v, which is more symmetric?
Yeah, so that asymmetry comes because of retarded boundary conditions.
Yeah, I think in one case, in the past null infinity, you are really looking at a Coulomb field, whereas in the future null infinity, you are looking at a radiative field, right? I think that's
right.
I see.
Because in the past, in fact, you I think asked this question whether there is also one of our V kind of behavior in the past, and that there isn't because there is no tail, because that's where you are setting up your problem, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
The only thing you cannot avoid is the Coulomb part of the field.
Right.
So Sally, just to refresh Praha's question, I know we had discussed this, I've forgotten now, but is the conservation law that log u plus log r mod at scri equal to log v plus log r mod at scri minus, or is it like just log u at scri plus is same as log r at scri minus? What is the, is what you wrote is the exact statement, or is it like you have to add both modes or something like that at scri plus and scri minus?
Yes. So right now I think that there are like if we use advanced solutions, then they would obey a different kind of conservation law with a log r term here and a log v term here.
So if you use Feynman, you will get a different conservation law. And so can you use that to prove the quantums of theorem directly? I mean, without using Coolidge for the event. I mean, I was just wondering if you just use Feynman instead of retarded. And you write the conservation law.
Sorry, I didn't understand your question.
The quantums of theorem, this extra piece, is the one that you also described for the massless case. So it's not coming from the way you wrote the conservation law, right? Because that is classical. I mean, that depends on the retarded Green's function. But just suppose you use Feynman Green's function, then and then you wrote down a conservation law. I mean, will it include this quantums of factor? I mean, I'm just I don't know. Maybe it's a very vague question. Sorry.
Yeah. So that quantum factor is also related to use of Feynman propagator.
Yeah, that's why I'm asking. But if you did your analysis with instead of retarded like Feynman, just repeat your analysis. Yeah.
Yes. So there, so when we calculated this AR1,
Yeah.
so in the calculation of AR1, if we use the Feynman propagator,
Yes.
then we can reproduce the quantum soft factor also.
Oh, okay.
Yes. Okay.
I'll ask one more question.
Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Just this is a bit stupid. So I always have trouble with this. You have a log of U term or log of R, but U and R are dimensionful variables. So what
Yes.
exactly is the length scale that you're using to make it dimensionless? So you have to take log of something dimensionless. What is the exact quantity that you're thinking of?
Yes. So here it is something that depends on the it's a bulk scale, and so that will actually so if you look at this term, then it will be log U by some U naught, where U naught is some small quantity that will depend on the details of the scattering, and so that will actually contribute at this 1 over R square term.
So the size over which the scattering is non-trivial, I guess, right?
Yes. Right.
Okay. So then in your soft theorem, you have this similar sort of thing. So when you say omega, you really mean omega by omega naught, where omega naught is a typical scale of the hard particles.
Right.
Okay.
I think it's not the size of the hard particle probably, but maybe the range of interaction of the hard interaction or something.
Yeah, it's like impact parameter.
Yeah.
It's like log omega b. Yeah. Ashok, you had a question.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I was just asking, since you have some time, I mean, if we can go back to to actually, I mean, you got the quantum soft factor, right?
Yes.
From the classical conservation law.
Yes.
Can we explain the physics? I mean, what is it that gave the quantum soft factor from the classical conservation law?
Yes.
Because you didn't use Feynman propagator, but somehow it must be going in somewhere, right?
Yes.
And matrix uses Feynman propagator.
Yes. So this is the quantum mode in AR1 that contributes to the quantum soft factor. Okay. And so we can show that this AR1 term.
So when you say it's a quantum mode, maybe you can go back again. I mean, you are not using anything more than what you have already derived, right? The classical conservation laws.
Yes. So, okay. So now my hard expression of the charge is given in terms of AR1. Okay. So that expression is derived from the classical conservation law. Okay.
Okay.
And what I'm saying is that AR1 has a quantum piece to it. Okay. So let's see how this is quantum. Now, so this is a little bit indirect derivation. So the AR1 term, this is generic form of AR, and this AR1 term is actually related to a log U term in A. Okay, so this is a derivative, A dot, AZ dot. Okay, so if you have AZ goes like log U, then it produces a 1 over R term in AR. Is that fine?
So this is from the classical equation of motion?
Yeah, so this is box of A equal to 0. Okay. So the AR1 term is related to a log U term in AB. Now we can try to
sorry, AZ is just AZ, right? AZ.
Yeah, sorry, this should be AZ. Yeah. Okay. Now classically, sorry?
I mean, box is a linear equation, right? So that by itself will not relate probably AR with AZ. You are using Gauss law or something else also. I'm just.
Yeah. So here, so AZ will act as the free data for the gauge field, right?
I see. Okay. And you are integrating.
AZ and AZ. Yeah. Yeah. So here we are writing a generic homogeneous solution in terms of this free data. So there is a corresponding term for AZ bar also that I have not written down.
Okay.
Okay. So now what we see from this expression is that AR1 is related to log U term. Now classically we just have this this configuration for A.
Okay.
Okay. So classically there is no log U term. Okay. Now we can try to ask like how can you get a log U term in AZ? Then it turns out that once we put in the fact that at small omega there is a 1 over omega term in the gauge field, then we can show that the coefficient of log u is related to this kind of discontinuity in this mode. Okay, so once you come from positive side and once you come from negative side. Okay, so
at what point you are using the fact that you are these are quantum fields and not classical fields?
Yeah. So right now you can ask if this operator is like this is trivial or not. So classically this is trivial. The solution is continuous at omega goes to 0, whether you approach it from positive side or negative side.
Okay.
So this will become 0. Now you can substitute this operator put this operator in an S matrix and try to see if this is 0 or non-zero. Then it turns out that a quantum mechanically this operator is non-zero. Okay. Now what we can check is that retarded solutions are continuous at omega goes to 0. And if we consider solutions with Feynman boundary conditions, then these are not continuous at omega goes to 0.
Okay.
Okay. So this is how the quantum term like the quantum soft vector comes from. It comes from the discontinuity in omega goes to 0 limit. And and if we consider retarded boundary conditions, then there is no such discontinuity. So this log u mode turns out to be trivial. But if we consider Feynman boundary conditions, which we do in quantum theory, then this operator, then this discontinuity is non-trivial.
So you are saying somehow quantum theory forces you to replace retarded propagator by Feynman propagator? Somehow, right?
Yeah, I mean, so I started with the log omega soft theorem, right? And those amplitudes, I mean, that was itself calculated with Feynman propagators in the amplitudes.
Yeah, I mean that in the amplitude, yes, of course.
Yes, and there also, if you use only retard, like in your calculation, if you use only retarded propagators,
yeah,
then we don't get this soft vector.
Yeah, but I'm just wondering, in your logic, you started with a classical conservation law where you use retarded propagator.
Yes.
Right, and then somehow you see that there is a conflict. So would you say that the classical conservation laws that you started with themselves could be modified now, or that's not the case in quantum theory?
So what I'm saying is that we can start with the with this classical conservation laws and derive the full soft photon theorem. Okay. So that happens because of this. So instead, if we had used the conservation law with Feynman boundary conditions, then if we use Feynman boundary conditions, then at the future we have both log r and log u term, and at the past we have log v and log r term. Okay, and and the coefficients are such that they add up. So we have this. So log v will have a positive helicity insertions. So we saw that log u has some negative helicity insertions, and they add up appropriately.
Okay.
So what I'm essentially saying is that it is not necessary to use the conservation law, but so more correctly, one should start if one should start with that law where we use Feynman boundary conditions. But it so happens that the coefficients will get related, and we can as well work with the classical conservation law.
I see.
Because like Prahar discussed in his lecture also, this soft modes always come in this pairs, like positive insertion at, like if you have a positive helicity insertion at the future, then there is a negative helicity insertion at the past, and they always add up.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Sorry,
so
Sally,
if
can I ask base? So if you start with retarded boundary conditions and you put some source at past time like infinity and evolve, and then you look at the solution at large U at future null infinity, then that solution will always go as 1 by U, right? It will not have a log U. I mean, this is related to what I think Ashok is asking. There will be no log U in the classical solution, right? Like
right.
So the fact that now that you have a log U is like it is not so it's not part of the classical solutions, that this new solution.
And just one thing I should emphasize is that this log U is not related to the log U that we had in FRA2.
Yeah, meaning this is dominant over the classical result, right? Because classical result was 1 over U.
Yes.
The quantum result somehow is dominating the classical result.
Right. Right. Yeah.
That's the confusion.
So I probably I didn't say it properly. So what sir is asking is correct. Like we should actually start with the conservation law that we get from Feynman boundary conditions. But it so happens that the coefficients in this conservation law will somehow match, and you can club them together and work with the classical conservation law that has log U and log R, and recover the entire soft photon theorem.
No, but as Ashok is saying, at large positive U, you are getting a log U mode, but this, as you are saying, this log U mode in classical theory is somehow 0. The coefficient of log U is 0.
Yes. Yeah. So the statement about classical, like this. Sorry, I didn't understand. What is the question now?
No, I mean the log U certainly dominates over 1 by U, right? I mean now you have a log U at large positive U, and that will dominate over the classical tail term, which is 1 by U. But
yes.
Here you are somehow saying that this log U, coefficient of log U is this A0 plus tilde minus A0 minus tilde. And I thought you said that this is 0 in the classical theory, or
right?
Maybe I mean, is that?
Yes, this is 0 in classical theory.
Okay.
So there is no way to take the classical limit of this?
Yeah, so but one way of taking classical limits was described in Alok's recent paper, where he actually showed that in that classical limit, this quantum soft factor, it is not there.
No, but that was perturbative, Sally. I mean, that was, for this large impact parameter, I mean, there is no quantum soft factor even if you just take Ashok's result and expand. I mean, in the coupling, you have to go to next to leading order to see this at a large impact parameter for 2-2 scattering. So we have not checked, we have not been able to prove that if you take the classical limit using that framework, we get that quantum soft factor drop out. I mean, sorry.
I thought you showed.
Yeah. The classical result we know is valid for even small impact parameter, right?
Yeah, I mean, a little more happened in the sense that certainly at leading order in coupling it's valid, but even at next to leading order for 2-2 scattering, actually it turns out somehow that in large impact parameter, the quantum soft factor just because of kinematics vanishes. And that's what we saw from the crossover type, this what Sal is describing. But the real non-trivial presence of quantum soft factor in that framework, I mean, in that setup is at next to leading order, which we have not been able to do. So we don't really have a proof from there. I mean, no, yeah.
Yeah. So other than that, I don't know how to take the appropriate classical limit and show that this term goes to 0 in that limit. But what we can do is we can check explicitly for classical configurations that this term is not there.
Yeah.
So just one thing I will say is that in the other way of taking classical limit, the reason Feynman pole doesn't contribute is because of the way this classical limit is set up, where put all the particles on shell. So somehow it like kills the Feynman pole. I mean, but here it's a bit different. I mean, it looks like Feynman pole is contributing, but it's vanishing somehow in the classical limit, right? In the way you are setting things up. It's not like
the crucial.
Yeah. Sorry, go on, Parag.
No, I'm just restating. I think the crucial thing is that classical you're using retarded propagator, but you're otherwise in quantum mechanics you have to use the Feynman propagator, and so the pole structure is very different. You have 1 over p in the soft pole is 1 over p dot q minus I epsilon.
Yeah.
And it's really this minus I epsilon, which is, and you can't get rid of that. Any limit you take, this minus I epsilon will always contribute.
Well, I mean, that's this framework that Kosover et al. Has, in the sense that it's not taking the limit in that sense, but you really if you put all the particles on shell, you get some delta function constraints which kill the Feynman pole. I mean, that you can explicitly see in the way they set up their framework.
I don't think you can kill this quantity, because you can check that coefficient of that delta term is sum over all charges. At least in QED, sum over Q.
No. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that if you take a Feynman propagator and you look at the pole, the Feynman pole, the extra pole that you get.
Yeah.
So the residue of that vanishes because of the way classical limit is taken in this framework of Kosover.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
I see. Yeah, I have to say, I'll just add to connect it to, I have been thinking about this log U term also quite a lot, because if you try to do it from this covariant phase space stuff that I was talking about, it seems that for the symplectic form to be finite, even at the classical level, you can include such modes and you still get a finite symplectic form. So it is possible to extend the kind of discussion that I've had in my talk yesterday, to include these log terms in this covariant phase space analysis also. This is just a throwaway comment. I don't really have anything much to say.
Yeah. But it kind of connects to what Sally mentioned, most incomplete part of this whole picture, because we don't have any symmetry interpretation of this conservation law. Like if you take this Sally soft charge and act it on the radiative gauge field in the original covariant phase space without this extra mode you're saying, then the action is just zero. So it looks like it's like a pure. So that mode will be needed to have any sort of symmetry interpretation of this conservation law, which is not there, right?
Can I ask what happens if you still have this log divergence when U goes to minus infinity?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. Actually, one thing you can show is that the way these logs are appearing, they're always appearing in the form of log of U plus I epsilon. And then you can keep track of the difference, because there's a branch cut in U as you go from minus infinity to plus infinity. And this branch cut is in fact capturing the branch cut is the soft theorem. And the coefficient of the log is then this difference, this A tilde 0 plus minus A tilde 0 minus. The branch cut in the log term, you have to keep track of the I epsilon. It's log of U plus I epsilon. That's really what you're getting. And so you have to keep track of there's a branch cut as you go from minus infinity to plus infinity. And that's actually the branch cut that you pick up. That's the soft theorem, in other words.
Okay.
Well, because the soft theorem is related to the difference, right? The difference ascribed at plus infinity minus the gauge field at plus infinity minus the gauge field at minus infinity. Right? That's the soft mode. And that's exactly, if you include these log divergences and you put in log of U plus I epsilon, then that difference is precisely the branch cut. So somehow there's some analytic structure on Square Plus that's going on, which is capturing both this log divergent piece and the soft theorem all in one go. This is something I'm thinking about. I don't have anything super concrete or nice. I don't have a nice story, but I think it's very related closely to this.
Okay, thank you. I hadn't thought about that.
Yeah, in frequency space, I mean, you do get a log of omega plus I epsilon and log of omega minus I epsilon. And these are the ones which distinguish between what is at u equal to plus infinity and what is at u equal to minus infinity.
Exactly, yeah. So then in going back to position space, you have the same type of structure. So if you study the correlation functions, so like I mentioned, you can think of S matrices as correlation functions on Square Plus, and then you try and ask what is the analytics. So that's what you should really do. I mean, you're studying classical configurations here, but in the quantum theory, you have some correlation function, and then you want to study the analytic structure of this correlation function on Square Plus. And there's some interesting branch cuts in log of u, which you are finding exactly like. So it's exactly like this type of structure.
Okay. Any other questions? If not, let's thank Sally for a fantastic talk. Let's all unmute and thank.